Welcome back to iCIMS Fireside Chats. I'm Trent Cotton, and in this series, we like to take the hottest industry topics and invite on some experts to help you develop the strategies that you need to succeed. Today's conversation is all about building talent strategies that actually drive business KPIs. I am joined by Carrie Yarnot, who is the CEO of Meritage Talent Solutions and a seasoned strategist who's advised companies like Pepsi, Pfizer, Northwestern Mutual, and CVS. She's also the author of the Talent Trifecta, where she outlines a very simple but powerful model for leaders, which is attraction, selection, and retention, and how you cannot fix one without addressing the others. So let's dig in. Well, Kara, welcome to the iCIMS Fireside Chat. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Trent.
Awesome. Well, just for the audience, because I know you and I both know, you and I got to spend some time together on the Purple Acorn Network in Nashville for RecFest. And
Yes.
As soon as we got through with your interview, I said, okay, yeah, we got to have you on for the iCIMS Fireside Chat. So excited. I feel good because I've got a little bit of a preview of what you're going to be saying. So I just want to dig right in. First, tell us about your book, because we're going to be unpacking a lot of awesome knowledge that comes out of that.
Yeah. So my book's now been out almost 6 months. It's called The Talent Trifecta, a executive's guide to attracting, selecting, and retaining the right talent. And I wrote it based on my now almost 3 decades in the talent space and industry. And what I found, I spent first 17 years of that on the practitioner side as a recruiter, VP of talent acquisition, corporate executives, and then flipped to the consulting side about 14 years ago.
Okay.
And what I found through that entire experience is the most successful projects, the most successful talent acquisition teams, the organizations that were really getting it right were the organizations where the executives, beyond just the chief human resources officer, were truly engaged in talent strategies, not just building them, but executing them. And as I would go into companies to start consulting on changing their strategies or solving their retention problems or solving their selection problems, that those companies that had the C-suite fully involved were those that were the most successful. Right. So I started looking for a book that I could send to my clients in advance, or even leave behind afterwards for them to share with their next level of direct reports. And I found a lot of great books, but they were mostly HR people talking to HR people with great content, which we have a lot of that in the industry, and there's a lot of great content out there. But I couldn't find the one that spoke to executives. And so I said, maybe I need to write that book. And that's where the whole concept for the Talent Trifecta was born. And I took the chunk of time to actually write it and get it out there in the world.
I love that. I love, and it struck me when you first told the story at RecFest. Not many people look around and go, well, there's not a book on this. The heck with it. I'll write it. So kudos to you.
Little did I know what I was getting into. But,
I was about to say, I have written a couple of books, and people are like, well, just crank them out. I'm like, it doesn't quite happen like that. But I do love how you kind of open the book of talent acquisition is broken, and how you go through and just kind of lay it out. There was a lot of similarities. I was like, oh yeah, I experienced this because I came from the line of business into HR, so I always was talking business. But I did find that sometimes whenever I was talking to HR colleagues, I had to change it a little bit and put it in HREs, as we were talking about before. But now, what were some of the patterns? I mean, you kind of hit it at a high level, but what were some of the patterns or even some of the disconnects that you kept seeing in your consulting work that said, hey, we're solving the wrong problem?
Right. So much of what we encounter in the talent and HR space is that we're not framing the problems that we're trying to solve for our business partners in business language. So we're talking past each other, and that's happening all the time. And so we're bringing HREs, they're bringing business speak, and we truly are talking about the same thing, but we're not using each other's language.
Right.
And as an HR person, for whatever reason, we could have a whole podcast on this. There's a stigma that, where we as HR people don't understand the business. So as soon as we go off in language that doesn't matter to business people, they immediately assume we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So reframing what we're trying to accomplish on the HR side into business language in terms that they understand, in terms that matter to them, and in framing them into solutions that matter to them, we immediately get their attention. So when I talk to HR audiences, because I am one of them, I grew up as one of them, they start to say, okay, Kara can help me get there. I'm not a business person talking down to them. I'm an HR person trying to bring them up. And so they don't fear me. And then business people, I bring credibility to them because I have solved it for major brands and I've helped them see other ways. So I can help bring the two groups together. But we can start to say, who is the audience we're talking to on the business side? And how do we frame what it is we're trying to get as an HR person into language that matters to them? And we can all be speaking about the same thing. And then we can all get what we want. I tell the HR people, use the language that matters to them and talk about what they want to get what you want. And then we're all getting to the same place.
Yeah, that was something early in my HR career because I stood out, not in a good way. And it took me probably 6 months to a year. And I remember exactly when it happened. I was talking to an executive about a search and an HR problem. And I realized I was not asking HR type of questions. I was asking more about, okay, you're not hitting your KPIs. Is it a people problem? Is it a process problem? I was going about it like I would whenever I was on the line of business trying to solve a problem in my organization. And then it clicked. I said, they were so much more open with me versus me going in as this is an HR investigation.
Yes.
We were able to solve the problem together. So you've talked a lot about, you've mentioned trifecta. What is the trifecta? And can you kind of double click down on each of the three?
Sure. So the talent trifecta is attraction, selection, and retention. And they're all related to each other in many ways, shapes, or form. But you can't solve just one part of the talent trifecta without looking at how the other two impact it. And where it really relates when we talk to business people is the one they tend to care about the most, which is retention. Yeah. Because we can quantify and we can put profitability numbers assigned to retention because it is very easy to calculate what retention costs a business. I don't care what kind of business you are in, I can help you understand the cost of talent leaving your organization. Gallup tells us after years of research, it's somewhere between 50% and 200% of an individual's salary. Depends on your industry, the type of talent that you're after, all of those things. But we can find those numbers for your organization. And it might vary across region or type of position, but whatever it is, we can start to quantify what turnover costs your organization, particularly unwanted turnover. That's really where we can start to hone in on it. And we can show organizations that what this is costing them and that how retention ties to how you are selecting your talent and how you're attracting them to the organization. And that we can't just focus on how do we keep people that are thinking about leaving the organization from leaving. Because once you start thinking about leaving the organization,
you're already halfway out the door.
Exactly, 60% of those people are going to go anyway, no matter what you do in those 2 months from the time they think about it till they leave. We have to go all the way back to how do you present yourself as an organization? What's the message you're putting in the marketplace? Who were you attracting at the beginning? How are we improving that efficiency? How are we improving who you bring in? And then how are you actually selecting people to improve the likelihood that they actually stay for a long time? And that all parts of the trifecta are connected to each other. And if you ignore one piece of a triangle, the triangle falls apart. And we talk about that.
Yeah, you actually gave a fantastic example. So many people think of retention as being kind of the end of the cycle. But I
Right.
mean, you just called it out perfectly. It starts with attraction and selection. You want to
Yes.
attract the right person and select them for the right role that they will want to stay in and grow, whether it's up or sideways. So I
Right.
love that. I love that. It's a perfect example of how all three are connected, right?
It really is. And there's so much that we do internally in the selection process. It's just not your initial selection in the door for the first
Mhm.
job that you have in an organization. It's those internal mobility pieces. It's
Yes.
how people move around, because there is a lot of data that shows us that someone that even just moves in a position one time in an organization, they are 44% more likely to stay at your organization 3 additional years
Oh,
above your
wow.
average. So think about people who move multiple times, they're likely to stay significantly longer. So what's your internal mobility plan? How do you select people to move around, not just up the ladder, but laterally or throughout the web? How are you working on that? That impacts your retention, but it also impacts who do you bring in the organization. We want to bring people in that are more likely to fit in multiple roles.
Mhm.
So this truly impacts how you are doing things for the longevity of your organization, which I love to point out to executives, the longevity, the profitability of your organization obviously impacts most executives' bonuses, and
Right.
executives care about their bonuses.
And
So
don't we
things,
all?
yes, so things we do around all parts of the trifecta can truly impact what's happening in the profitability of the company as much as decisions they make about pricing
Mhm.
can impact those things. And typically the people they're hiring are impacting the decisions about pricing as well. So we want to get the right people
Right.
in those roles.
Yeah. So in your consulting world, which of the
Mm-hmm.
three do companies struggle with the most? And why
Oh,
and why do you think that is?
so often companies come to me because they are having a retention problem, and they think that it is, oh my gosh, we need to pay them more, or oh my gosh, we did a return to work, and we think that's the entire problem. But when you start to do the research and peel back the layers, that's not the problem at all. It is something else. There is a lot of data. I think we talked about this last time you and I talked, that Gallup did a survey of 1 million US workers, and 75% of them said they had left a job because of their manager.
Mhm.
Has nothing to do with how much they're paid or what the company's policies or benefits are. It's the wrong person is in the manager job. And when we dig in and find that out, lo and behold, this is a selection problem. The company doesn't have a great manager selection process, because the top two reasons people put people in manager roles, organizations select managers, are who's been there the longest, stupid reason, or
I'm glad
who
you said
is,
it.
yes, or who's the best individual performer in that function. And the best engineer doesn't make the best engineering manager. The best
No.
salesperson never makes the best sales manager.
No.
These are not the best reasons to be putting people into manager roles. They should be selecting people for propensity to be able to do things like set goals, to be able to do things like coach, to
Mhm.
be able to
Have hard conversations, because Lord knows
exactly
so many leaders avoid that, and that
avoid
needs
that.
to happen, right?
Exactly. Hold people accountable.
Mhm.
That's one of the biggest team complaints, that I do my job, but everybody around me isn't doing their job, and then that gets dumped on me because the manager doesn't hold people accountable. Well,
Mhm.
a typical top performer has never had to hold anybody accountable because they worry about themselves,
Right.
and they get it all done and they pick up everybody's slack. They don't understand this concept. So
Mm.
when you go in and talk about, let's put better manager selection and let's coach people into individual contributor roles, and lo and behold, often a problem with this is compensation structure,
Yeah.
because they don't build comp programs that allow people to stay in individual contributor roles and continue to grow in compensation.
Yeah.
So you start to uncover some of these problems, but often a retention problem is really an attraction or a selection problem that we can solve. I did this with a electronics manufacturing company based outside of Chicago, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. They came and said it's a retention problem. and our recruiters don't know how to find people. Neither of those things were true. It was truly a selection problem because they had no process for selecting people. When I went around and interviewed all their leaders and asked, how do you select people? What questions are you asking? What criteria are you using? None, no criteria, no process, no interview selection process. It was decision by committee. And when teams couldn't decide who to hire, their solution was to bring the person back and make the CEO decide. So it was taking them 4 weeks from first interview to decision to get a decision on a candidate. So they were losing good candidates. And I was brought all this data back to them. An argument ensued. I had a meeting of VPs and they're like, this can't be true. I'm like, I'm bringing you the data. And then I went back and said, do you remember this candidate and this? And every one of them, they're like, oh my gosh. I said, you lost all of these people. It's not that recruiting can't bring you good people. It's you don't have any criteria to decide who belongs here. And then you're losing them. And then when they do come in, it's everybody the CEO picked. Well, the CEO doesn't manage any of these people. And then they're all quitting because this isn't working. So we put competency-based hiring in place. And in less than a year, their turnover went down 40%.
Wow.
Just with that, I trained all their interviewers. We completely changed the way that they did it. Retention problem solved. And now people are like, oh, now we can actually have internal mobility because we all agree on the base competencies. So it was a retention problem, but the core of it was in selection.
Love that. That is a fantastic example. And I know throughout my career, it was, I didn't have, I wish I would have had this. I always said it was process, people, or pay.
Yes.
There was something going on with one of the 3 Ps. And,
yes.
It got to the point when I would be brought into something. I had trained the leaders so much that they're like, it's not a pay problem, but we can't figure out, is it a people or a process?
Which of the other Ps it is.
Like,
so
hey,
help.
Cool. We already took out a third of it, but I love yours because to me, yours is so much more interconnected and it's truly a balance. You can't have one out of whack because it's going to pull the other 2.
Correct. And it's so easy when the economy changes and the market changes. And what we naturally do as business leaders is say, well, we don't have a lot of hiring, so I can ignore attraction. I don't need to worry about talking about who we are as a business, or I don't need to keep my recruiters. And my favorite analogy here is, let's talk about this to your chief growth officer, your chief revenue officer. If for some reason you had a problem in your production line and you had no product to sell for 4 months, would you actually stop talking to your customers, and would you actually fire your salespeople and say, well, we don't have anything to do for 4 months, so we don't need to talk to any of those people, and we don't need to tell the market about our product, and we don't need to keep anybody warm, and we can worry about it later, and then hire all new salespeople when our product is ready to sell and expect them to know how to sell this product and just ramp it right back up.
Right.
I would get laughed out of a chief growth officer's office if anybody made that recommendation. But we do it all the time to recruiting. We don't have any people to hire, so fire them all and stop talking about who we are as an employer. And then as soon as the hiring turns back on, because it turns back on like right away, and suddenly we need to hire a bunch of people at once, and there's no recruiters around, and we haven't been talking about who we are as an employer, or what we stand for, or what it's like to work here. And then we get fresh recruiters who don't know our brand, they don't know our EVP, and then everybody gets mad that we can't hire quickly, and then the head of TA gets fired. And when you talk to a business person and you put it in those terms, you're like, this is product sales, guys. It's the same thing, or services sales. If we suddenly had nothing to sell out of not in our control, what would we do? They're like, oh yeah, we wouldn't do that. That would be just completely stupid business decision. And they're like, okay, now I understand.
Now I'm tracking.
now I get it. Let's all talk about it differently. Now it's easier for me to roll into someone else's company and challenge their business leaders that way than it is for the head of TA to talk to them about that. But I can bridge that gap a little bit and say, let's think about this. What makes the most sense? How can we redeploy the recruiting talent to help the organization in other ways, so we can keep some messaging out there, but we can turn the machine back on right away. And then suddenly we have smarter decisions being made.
Mm-hmm.
And because we just start talking about it in business terms. This is not what you would do if your business was putting people in jobs.
Right. And I love that example because, usually whenever they start looking at letting go of recruiters, it's usually the highest paid, which are most often the most experienced. And then,
Yes.
it's so counterintuitive. So I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah.
All right. So just as a reminder, the trifecta is attraction, selection, and retention. So I am quite sure that someone listening to this absolutely fell in love with you, fell in love with the concept. Where do they get the book?
So the book's available on Amazon. Just go to Amazon, the Talent Trifecta, you will find it. The talenttrifectabook.com is the book's website as well. There's more information there. There's list of events where I'll be out talking about the book. There's free downloads related to the book on the book website as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Kara, thank you so much. I always enjoy talking to our partners. And I'm so glad that we were able to do this again. I learned even more than I did last time.
Thanks so much, Trent. I appreciate it.
All right. And for the audience, I will make sure that in the details that we will put her LinkedIn and all the links to her books. Make sure that you go out and support. And I am quite sure if you reach out to Kara with a question, she will be very quick to respond. So thanks again for joining.